The same people who told you you'd own nothing and like it. The same people who printed money, destroyed the middle class, and possibly ran a war against humanity from the shadows are now standing on the world stage waving that white flag. Because this week in Davos, the head of the World Economic Forum admitted out loud the world now places far less trust in us.
We believe that outside the United Nations, this is the largest gathering of global leadership of the post-COVID period of time. For many people, this meeting feels out of step with the moment. We hear all about the elites. And how does that play out in an age of populism? How does an established institution make a difference in an era of deep institutional mistrust? And there's some truth to the critique. I believe in this forum for a long time. I certainly wouldn't be leading this if I didn't believe that we can change and make the world better. But it's also obvious that the world now places far less trust in us to help shape what comes next. If the World Economic Forum is going to be useful going forward, it has to regain that trust.
No. Larry, the world doesn't mistrust you. The world figured you out. And once that happens, there's no rebuilding trust. There's no putting a genie back in the bottle. There is no reset. There is no going back. Globalism is dead. It failed.
Well, I think you should start at a much higher level.
Okay.
We are in Davos at the World Economic Forum. And the Trump administration and myself, we are here to make a very clear point. Globalization has failed the West and the United States of America. It's a failed policy. It is what the WEF has stood for, which is export, offshore, far shore, find the cheapest labor in the world, and the world is a better place for it. The fact is, it has left America behind. It has left the American workers behind. And what we are here to say is that America First is a different model, one that we encourage other countries to consider, which is that our workers come first. We can have policies that impact our workers. Sovereignty is your borders. You're entitled to have borders. You shouldn't offshore your medicine. You shouldn't offshore your semiconductors. You shouldn't offshore your entire industrial base and have it be hollowed out beneath you. You should not be dependent for that which is fundamental to your sovereignty on any other nation. And if you're going to be dependent on someone, it darn well better be your best allies. Okay? And so that is a different way of thinking. It is completely different than the WEF. I viewed the WEF as not a flagpole in the middle, but in fact, they are the flag. Whichever way the wind blew, so it blew. You should have solar, you should have wind. Why are you going to do solar and wind? Why would Europe agree to be net zero in 2030 when they don't make a battery? They don't make a battery. So if they go 2030, they are deciding to be subservient to China, who makes the batteries.
That was not a policy disagreement. That was an obituary. And while the global elites were melting down in Switzerland, the market started screaming. Bitcoin nuked 2K in minutes, down 4,000 in a day and 11,000 on the week. 1 billion in leveraged longs vanquished. Meanwhile, 1.3 trillion erased from U.S. stocks. The Nasdaq and S&P just wiped out all of 2026's gains. Stocks down, bonds down, treasuries failing, and the dollar offering zero safety. And gold just said, I warned you. 4,850 an ounce, all-time highs. 5K is now a when, not an if. So ask yourself, if this is just volatility, why does it feel like everything is breaking at once? Why are pension funds dumping treasuries? Why is Japan's bond market cracking, the very foundation of global liquidity? Why are banks suddenly terrified? Why does every road lead back to monetary trust collapsing. Because what you're watching is not a sell-off. It's a global monetary order coming apart at the seams. And whether Davos wants to admit it or not, Bitcoin was the focal point, the thing they can't control, the thing they can't print, the thing that exposes the lie. The Green New Deal is dead, globalization is dead, and the old system is eating itself alive. So the real question is, what replaces a system the world no longer trusts? What survives when bonds break, banks panic, and elites admit defeat? And why does every path forward keep pointing to Bitcoin? Today we're breaking it all down. What actually happened? What's happening behind the curtain? And where all of this is heading next. So fasten your seatbelts.
But now let's go into the future. What are some of the mega trends that are going to reshape investing, asset management as you look forward?
I mean, there's two, but they're all interconnected, and that's going to be AI and tokenization of financial assets. So digital assets, those are the two mega trends that are going to totally reshape financial services. I had a lunch today with a very prominent former finance minister, central bank, very prominent guy. And he wrote a big paper on tokenization.
Right.
And he would say, he couldn't say it in his former role, but he would say it today as a private citizen. The banking system is being left behind in so many ways through technology.
Bitcoin doesn't have a money printer. The supply is fixed, and people will go to it in times of uncertainty, kind of like they did with gold.
Sorry to say that I trust more independent central banks with a democratic mandate than private issuers of Bitcoin, which have a very useful role. But
Bitcoin is a decentralized protocol. There's actually no issuer of it. So that's in the sense that central banks have independence. Bitcoin is even more independent. There's no country or company or individual who controls it in the world. And so, anyway, I think it's a healthy competition because if people can decide which one they trust more, and I think it's actually the greatest accountability mechanism on deficit spending.
All right, to the French boomers, central banker, GFY, central bankers of the world, GFY. We're a little down today, but we're far from out. And if you're asking what the hell just happened, well, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent nails it.
I believe the markets are going down because the Japanese bond market had a 6 standard deviation move for the past 2 days. That would be in their 10-year bonds. I've been in touch with my economic counterparts in Japan and urged them to take the necessary measures to stabilize their bond market, but that's spilling all over into all bond markets. German yields are up, French yields are up, U.S. yields are up, again, it's mostly the Japanese bond market, got nothing to do with Greenland.
Here's the point. What we all just witnessed wasn't a random sell-off. Yes, headlines blamed tariffs. Yes, the media screamed Greenland. Yes, Trump threatening Europe made for easy narratives. But the timing doesn't line up. By the time U.S. markets opened, stocks were already getting smoked. Shiny rocks were ripping to record highs. And treasuries, the so-called safe haven, getting wrecked. That's because all this didn't start in Washington. It didn't start in Brussels. It didn't start in Greenland. It actually started just hours earlier in Tokyo. Japan broke first. Japan's bond market snapped. Yields on 20, 30, even 40-year Japanese bonds exploded higher in days. Not weeks, not months, days. For decades, Japan supplied the world with cheap money. Zero rates, endless liquidity, the foundation of global carry trades. When those yields surged, that entire system unwound instantly. Leverage got expensive, liquidity vanished, carry trades blew up. That's why everything sold at once. Stocks, bonds, the dollar weakened, gold and silver ripped. This wasn't geopolitical chaos, though that is happening. It was financial reality reasserting itself. And Japan blinking means higher global borrowing costs, capital flowing home, pension funds reassessing risk, and markets realizing the old assumptions no longer hold. Which brings us to the bigger picture, because this is exactly what Ray Dalio warned about in Davos. The global monetary order is breaking.
Let's step back from the sensational and be clear about what I mean. The monetary order is breaking down. Okay. What I mean by the monetary order is that fiat currencies and debt as a storehold of wealth is not being held by central banks in the same way, and that there was a change. The biggest market to move last year was the gold market, far better than the tech markets, right, and so on. And the U.S. markets underperformed foreign markets because of the fact you could see it in the numbers of the central banks and so on. So let's just look at the fact that on the other side of trade deficits and trade wars, there are capital and capital wars. And so as we're looking at that, and you reported what the stock market and so on, but you didn't report that the gold market is also up 3.
We did say that earlier this morning.
Okay.
It's up to
But
record
I'm
levels
saying
again, and silver.
Is you look at what is happening and why it's happening and who's buying it. So let's just take a moment on that capital war issue, okay? We know that both the holders of U.S. dollar denominated debt, which is money, and those who need it, the United States, are worried about each other, right? So if you have other countries who are holding it and they're worried about each other, and we're producing a lot of it, that's a big issue, right? So you have to explain what is going on with fiat currencies, generally speaking. And now if you take the conflicts, you can't ignore the possibility that capital wars, in other words, maybe there's not the same inclination to buy U.S. debt and so on. We at least need to talk about those possibilities and find out who is buying and selling what that is behind these market movements.
It's breaking, and that's why everything feels like it's coming apart, because it is. And if you zoom out, a pattern emerges. Trump, bombastic, polarizing, unapologetic. Well, he didn't randomly break things. He pushed directly on every fault line. There are decades where nothing happens and then weeks where decades happen. That's where we are, and the establishment and mainstream media missed it because they're still trying to explain new outcomes using old frameworks. They don't understand what they're watching, but let's walk through it. On defense, the Trump-Zelensky press conference was framed as a disaster. Weeks later, Germany passes a €1 trillion defense and infrastructure package, the largest military investment in Europe in generations, exactly the burden sharing Trump demanded for years. On the great competition, Trump tried to decouple from China while preventing a Beijing-Moscow alliance. Tariffs were never about trade. They were about leverage. China wasn't a competitor. China was a geopolitical adversary. Industrial reshoring, export controls, tariffs, they were all signals. On tariffs broadly, as Scott Bessent pointed out, a structured tariff regime could generate $300 to $600 billion a year. I mean, that doesn't fix a 6% deficit, but it forces discipline into a system addicted to debt. Then you get the stuff they mocked: Greenland, Panama Canal pressure, renaming the Gulf. But every one of those moves sent the same message. The U.S. must reassert control over its hemisphere. Arctic shipping lanes matter. China and Panama is a liability. And the Americas are not an open playground for rivals. Even American manufacturing. Trump was ridiculed for demanding its return. Now, both parties support industrial policy, CHIPS Act, IRA, same destination, just a little different branding. On DEI and cultural fragmentation, Trump didn't just talk, he acted. Merit over identity, neutrality over ideology. You can argue the style, but the policy landed. This wasn't 4D chess, but the Orange Man is indeed playing a game. His delivery is intentionally disruptive because disruption forces engagement and action. Nobody reads a 40-page Council on Foreign Relations memo, but an inflammatory move? That dominates conversation for days and brings us to the question: can disruption yield direction? No society ever thrives because it had a visionary plan. It thrives because it corrects its mistakes. It's a correction. The great rebalancing. Debt has limits. Dependence has costs. And abstraction eventually collides with reality. The 1990s promised a frictionless world. The 2020s are delivering the reckoning. Slower growth, harder choices, political pain, and politicians will delay because the fixes are unpopular. But make no mistake, we're only just getting started, and before we bring it home, did Donald the Orange just smack the caviar out of the no king's mouths in Davos? That's right, it's big finish time, but before we bring it home, look at our likes!
3 or 4 times, maybe. I gotta pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
Let's take a moment to recognize our sponsors powering this show over at the Bitcoin Way. At the Bitcoin Way, they'll walk you through all things Bitcoin, like it's kindergarten with Satoshi. From setting up your first wallet to running your first node and so much more. No tech skills needed. The Bitcoin Way has got you covered. You want $1 million Bitcoin? Better act like it. Self-custody is not optional. That is the revolution. Schedule a free 30-minute consultation with the Bitcoin Way today using that link in the show notes. Today's show is brought to you by Ledn. If you ever need cash without selling your Bitcoin, Ledn makes that possible. The global leader in Bitcoin-backed lending, Ledn has issued over $9 billion in loans since 2018, and they have a perfect record of protecting client assets. No credit checks, funds in less than 6 hours, no monthly payments, repay whenever you want with zero penalties, and proof of reserves reports, verified by a top accounting firm, are published every 6 months. Ledn gives Bitcoin holders a secure, transparent way to unlock liquidity without selling. Learn more at learn.ledn.io/simply. That's learn.ledn.io/simply.
Unleash innovation in savings and financing. I'm also working to ensure America remains the crypto capital of the world. And to that end, last year I signed the landmark Genius Act into law. Now Congress is working very hard on crypto market structure legislation. Bitcoin, all of them, which I hope to sign very soon, unlocking new pathways for Americans to reach financial freedom. And I did it for 2 reasons. Number one, I thought it was politically good, and it was. I got tremendous political support. But more importantly, China wanted that market too. It's just like they want the AI. And we've got that market, I think, pretty well locked up. If I didn't do it, Biden was totally against it until before the election when they realized that, there were millions of people voting against him over crypto. And all of a sudden they loved it very much, but it was too late. They blew it. But it is politically popular, but it's much more importantly, we have to make it so that China doesn't get the hold of it. And once they have that hold, we're not going to be able to get it back. So I'm honored to have done it. Finally, I've instructed government-backed institutions to purchase up to $200 billion and more.
He wants Americans to reach financial freedom. That's the polar opposite of what basically everyone in that room desires. You heard Frenchie earlier with that peanut butter in his mouth or whatever, and it looks like David Sachs also delivered an update.
A good compromise is everyone leaves a little bit unhappy, right? But I think what's going to happen is that after market structure passes, the banks are going to get fully into the crypto industry. So we're not going to have a separate banking industry and crypto industry. It's going to be one digital assets industry. And I think
and will they be regulated
their opinions are going to evolve over time. And I bet you, over time, the banks like the idea of paying yield because they're going to be in the stablecoin business.
But will they also be regulated the same way? And I guess that's a big, the banks will say, hey, if they get to do all the same things we do, how come they don't get regulated the same way?
Well, I guess because they're offering slightly different products, right? Yeah. So, but everyone offering the same product should be regulated in the same way, and we want to get to that harmonization.
If you listen carefully to the conversation at Davos, every single one of them is a bullhorn for Bitcoin, because as the global monetary order breaks, as this 50-year fiat experiment eats itself alive, the Bitcoin standard doesn't lobby, it doesn't ask permission, it just takes center stage.
People think about our current financial system as kind of sacrosanct and it's the only way to do it. But if you study the history of money, really it's got created in like 1971 when Nixon went off the gold standard in the US, and we currently have the system where most central banks don't have any link to a hard commodity underneath. I think fiat currencies are going to continue to exist for a long time, but we're also seeing the birth of a new monetary system that I would call the Bitcoin standard instead of the gold standard. And in the crypto space, that is a return to sound money and something that is inflation resistant, because democracies around the world, once we came off the gold standard, are struggling to balance their budget. They're all running deficits, and it's caused inflation in fiat currencies. And so there is a real segment of the population that is looking for a new system based on hard money.
This isn't about price. This is about trust. And when trust collapses, scarcity wins. Neutral money wins. Bitcoin wins. And the possibility of World War III is higher than ever, which is probably a good time to visit our new sponsor, Sat123. Because when cell service dies, life doesn't have to. Sat123 hooks you up with real satellite phones, Starlink kits, and rugged off-grid internet that works anywhere. Mountains, ocean, middle of nowhere, it doesn't matter. If you care about preparedness, freedom, and staying connected when it actually counts, go to sat123.com. That's sat123.com, and don't forget to use promo code SIMPLY for 15% off. No signal? No problem. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Let us know what you think below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and give us a pamp. Share the Sound Money Gospel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Love you guys. Peace.
If you prefer to go down with the ship, you.